Hello, everyone. Hey, I'm Dave Lundahl. I'm the CEO for InsightsNow. We're a behavioral marketing research company, and I welcome you all to this latest in our Webinars Now series. This is a webinar series that I think we've been hosting for 3 years. Today, we're going to address a really great topic, disruptive innovation, and how you can fuse behavioral insights and expert product development into becoming a disruptor. And I'm happy to be co-presenting today with Mark Crowell, who's the CEO for CuliNex, food product development consultancy. So Mark, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Dave. Glad to be here.
Yeah. All right, so before we get into the content for today, what I like to do is go through a little housekeeping. We're going to be taking a few polls today. We'll also be taking some questions at the end of the webinar, and you're going to have the sidebar. So use that sidebar as I'm showing here on the screen here to help you sort of navigate to put in questions during our presentation as they come to you, and then we'll address them at the very end. And the polls will automatically be presented to you, so you can just participate by voting, and then I'll show the tallies. So with that, let's get going here. Again, I'm Dave Lundahl. This is Mark and I's pictures on the screen right now. I've worked for both food companies as a consumer researcher. I was a professor at Oregon State University in the Food Innovation Center. At one point in my career, I founded a couple marketing research companies, the latest InsightsNow since 2003. And so I'm happy to be sharing this great working relationship here with Mark Crowell and his team at CuliNex. So Mark, over to you for your intro.
Yeah, thanks. Dave and I have been working together for a couple of years now on various projects. He's got a great team over at InsightsNow, very complementary to the team that I've got at CuliNex. We're a product development consultancy. I founded after serving for 7 years as the director of food product development for Starbucks, a coffee company. And I really wanted to move the company in Starbucks in the direction of clean label product development, and that didn't work out strategically for the company. So I founded CuliNex 15 years ago. We're a team of 16 located in the Seattle area, and we specialized in clean label development since our founding. Dave, likewise, has a real specialization in understanding the consumer on the clean label side, and so it was just a perfect marriage for us to get together. We know your time is very valuable today. We want to thank you for joining us. We hope we bring something of value to you today to improve your own product development process. If you're interested in learning more about what we have developed in this presentation, we're happy to offer a free 30-minute consultation with you. You can schedule that with you at your convenience, and just indicate that you're interested in that. At the end of the presentation, there'll be a survey. We certainly don't want this to be an infomercial. We think that the principles that we're presenting here today are relevant to everyone. And we'll be taking questions at the end of the webinar, and we can tell you more about our companies then if you want to stay a time and talk to us. If you want to copy the presentation, Dave's going to be sending those out. Don't worry about it. You don't have to order it. He'll be sending it out to everybody who registered for the presentation. So what are we here to talk about today? Dave gave you a bit of an intro, but today's presentation is about disruptive product innovation using behavioral insights. In this presentation couldn't be more timely. The term disruption is certainly taking on a new meaning for all of us now. We're working from our home offices, the restaurants are closed, the kids are out of school. We need to be looking at consumer behavior now more than ever. because of the disruption that's happening in all of our lives. You're listening today because innovation is important to you in your company, and you're probably asking yourself the same questions. What does all of this mean for the kinds of products we're going to put into the marketplace? And while disruption is scary, it carries the seeds of opportunity. And I think, that's what Dave and I are trying to emphasize in today's presentation. Disruption creates behavioral changes, and those changes create new consumer needs. And if you can really understand that and address them with product innovation, you can put products into the market that have a huge impact, maybe an impact so large they'll disrupt an entire category. So, we think about the changes that COVID has already caused: increased demand for meal delivery services. Ratings of cooking shows are going up. Recipe searches are going up on the internet because people are cooking at home. Kitchen gadget sales are going up. These are just a few sort of generic examples of behavioral changes caused by COVID. But what's it doing on the product front? It's already showing us that there's an increased demand for immunity-boosting products, products that promote health and wellness, and there's even increase in products that are providing emotional comfort for people, things like ice cream and those sorts of things. So we think about what we're presenting today. We think it's relevant no matter what your development process is, but Dave and I have worked hard over the last year to come up with this particular process that we think addresses some of the disruptions that have occurred in the marketplace. But the key things that we want to point out here is that these disruptions certainly didn't start with COVID. Dave and I have been working on this for a while. It just so happens that what COVID has brought is disruptions on a huge scale and much, much faster than we normally would see in any sort of consumer behavioral change. So while the COVID is an external shock, it's really the consumer reaction to that shock that we want to focus in on. What is happening with the consumer that's going to drive a difference in their purchase decisions? That's really what we're trying to focus on. And the three largest behavioral drivers, at least in the clean label community, are familiar to us. They're not different, but there certainly is a different intensity to the way they're being sought. And those are seeking safety, health and wellness, and environmental sustainability. And those three drivers are responsible for just about anything that you want to point at in the market today in a broad sense. Non-GMO certifications, weight loss products, energy drinks, meatless Mondays. You can trace all of those things back to what clean label consumers and many consumers in general are looking for and what the drivers are. So understanding consumer motivations is one of the keys that we're going to be talking about throughout the presentation in designing successful products. So, there's a lot of information up on this slide. And Dave, I don't know if you see a small window down on the right lower side of the
I do.
screen or not.
I do.
There we go.
Interesting.
So, this is a dense slide. We've been speaking about disruption here for a few minutes generically, but the context or product category matters. So, we've got some examples here on this slide of disruptors, what's being disrupted, the drivers underneath, and the opportunities it's produced. And again, these are only just some examples of things that we've seen and worked with in the marketplace, and you've seen and worked with, I am sure. So I'm going to talk a little bit about disruptors and the disrupted, because there's really opportunities for both. when I think of a few examples in two that have been heavily impacted over the last 5 years or so, cereal, traditional cereals on the grocery store shelf, and sliced bread in the center store. They were both hit by the low carb craze, and then they got, that sort of faded away, and they got a double punch with the paleo disruptions. Now, these segments have very large players in them, and we've seen those plants being closed. We've seen companies shrinking. We've seen divestitures, acquisitions, all sorts of things happening within these categories to the major players. Similarly, the meat industry is going through some traumatic changes right now, not only just because of COVID and the shortage of workers to process the livestock, but they've gone to Washington to lobby for standards of identity to protect the products from the likes of Impossible and Beyond Meat. So seeing, what's behind the disruption, that's the job of behavioral researchers like Dave, and those insights that he and his team provide point the way for marketers to identify opportunities which developers like ourselves at CuliNex and you, if you're a developer, can use to create new products. And what I hope you take away from today's presentation is really the way that product development and behavioral insights can work together as one team to create a better, faster new product development process. So we're going to take a quick poll here, actually a couple, and we're going to ask you to vote. Are you currently working in one or more disruptive product categories? And we'll give you a minute there or 30 seconds to vote on that. And then we've got a second question for you to answer, and that is,
let's show the results on this one first.
Oh, we're going to do one. Okay.
And so I'm going to show, not everybody's voted yet, but I'm going to,
You're going to show what we got?
Trying to
and if you want,
close that.
The second question.
And yeah, so I'm going to 38. I'm going to just tell you, 38 said yes, 31 no, and 31% said not sure. So
okay.
So let's yeah. So let's we can go to the second one. Launch that one now.
Are you currently working on product categories that are being disrupted today? In other words, are you putting products into the marketplace that are meeting stiff headwinds? The consumer just seems to be swimming in a different direction. There seems to be alternative products that are sort of replacing the kinds of products that you're putting into the marketplace, and you feel like your category might be shrinking.
Yep. So
give you a moment to vote on that.
Yeah, a little more than a third of you had voted so far, and looks like about half. Still about half. I've got a few more.
Exercise your right to vote.
2/3. I'm going to get ready to close it here. Just give you another minute. So, all right. Okay. So I'm going to close it right now. So what we have is 80% are saying yes, 13% no, and 7% not sure.
Wow. Okay. All right. The presentation today is going to be very relevant to the 80% of you that are launching products that are going into categories that are being disrupted by other categories. Excellent. Well, we'll move on now.
Okay.
And, what are the ingredients that are necessary to becoming a disruptor? And I think we'd all rather be the disruptor than the disrupted. And to do that, we really need to understand the category, what consumers' needs are, and what beliefs are motivating those needs. They really kind of need to get under the hood of consumers, get into their minds. What products do they expect to be delivered, and how do they want to feel about buying those products? Are the products helping the planet? Are they doing something good for their bodies? Is it allowing them to indulge a little bit and just kind of kick back? Or is it something that their tribe is buying? They want to buy it because, all the people in their peer group are buying it. So where we're going to start is a disruptive category deep dive. We're going to try to understand what is going on in the particular category of interest that we are working in. And that deep dive also includes a look at competitors, who is winning, who's losing, and why. The next step is going to be ingredient innovation. To become a disruptor, you probably need to be working with new ingredients and or new processing technologies. Impossible Burger is a great example of that. They use genetically modified vegetable heme to create a bleeding effect in their meat. Non-dairy plant cheeses. I was just on a vendor call this morning where we were talking about non-dairy plant cheeses. They use some unique binding systems and unique fermentation processes to create their products. Cellular biology is another area that promises lab-grown meat. And they use bioreactors, a very unique process to grow cell tissue, not commercialized yet, obviously. And then, these are examples of unique ingredient and or processing technologies that create new products. The third leg of this stool, we believe, is culinary innovation. No matter how great the ingredients and the novel processes are, they've got to be turned into products that people want to eat. And there isn't a lot of history with a lot of these ingredients and these processing technologies. So they've got to be formulated by people who have keen culinary sensibility, and they're paying attention to texture and taste and flavor development, eye appeal, and all the rest. The fourth leg of that stool is, whatever the process is, it has to be scalable. It has to be cost competitive. Lab-grown meat is about $300,000 a pound. That's obviously going to be a little steep for most of us. That cost has got to be competitive with what's in the market if it's ever going to really get a toehold and make an impact. And lastly, there has to be a solid go-to-market strategy that takes account of pioneering costs in these unique categories and unique ingredients, fast followers that are going to latch on to whatever the leaders are doing, and unique manufacturing and distribution situations. We've got a keto client. Interestingly, they created a whole line with our help of keto products. It wasn't just products, though. They were creating an entire ecosystem, and they had an app, or they have an app, that goes with a subscription. When people buy their product, because it's direct to consumer, they get the app, and it tracks literally their state of ketosis and suggests what products they should buy. So, again, unique go-to-market strategy example.
Yeah, and if I could add, Mark, to all of this, is what we're seeing in this sort of new formula for success and being a disruptor is the disruptive category deep dive. That information feeds, the ingredient innovation, feeds the culinary innovation, feeds the scale up and the go-to-market strategy. And I think this is an important element, as we're talking about today, is combining the behavioral research with this other sort of aspects of technical expertise.
I think if you put all of these, 5 things together, what you get is you get the platform upon which you can do this sort of disruptive innovation. And, Dave and I have thought long and hard, done a lot of experimentation, read a lot of research, and, the result of that has been the Craves process, clean label research through agile evolutions into stores. And it really tries to understand the products that consumers want bought through their motivations. It really tries to translate those needs into product design in a very seamless, integrated way. And so we're going to take you through is the Craves process. And, you know, there could be elements of this process that you currently do in your existing product development process, or there could be some new things that you see here that you might want to incorporate. So these elements, kind of what's under the hood, what makes Craves work, and then we'll get into the actual process itself. The characteristics we just talked about in disruptive product development, first, behavioral insights. Everything is really keyed into understanding consumer motivations. What's driving them? What are they looking for? And in some cases, they don't even understand themselves, but it's, you know, Dave's job with his group to get those insights from the consumers. And that is woven throughout the entire development process, the Craves process, which we'll present in a moment. The second thing is a very tight integration with the design process. You know, Dave and I have a one-team philosophy between our two companies, and our developers and the behavioral researchers on Dave's team work, you know, hand in glove as one seamless team. That is one of the reasons why the third element is able to happen, which is speed to market. Each one of the steps in the Craves process is actually a sprint. And then the fourth element that kind of underlies the process is product development expertise. You got to be good at product development, and there's no, there's no substitute for just having been on the bench and been in plants for many years and done a lot of different kinds of products and being really good at doing the R&D. So how does your PD process meet these four platform requirements as you think about how you do PD today? So the Craves, we'll call the Craves solution, a series of phased, iterative, meaning it's a cycle, you know, kind of goes around and around, learning sprints. How does it work? How does it address these behavioral insights? How does it put it all together? It's this 5-step process, and we're going to kind of give you an overview, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dave to walk through, begin to walk through the details of the first step. But this entire process from end to end is rapid, agile, it's iterative, and it involves consumer behavior insights, and that is what is driving all the product development that's happening. So phase one, we're called that find your focus. It is the category review. It's that deep dive that we were just talking about, gaining those category insights, uncovering the unique opportunities with the white space, if you will, in each category, understanding competitors, and developing theses about what, that's not even a word, I don't think, about what, you'll help me on that, Dave, you got the PhD, about what is driving the category and where the opportunities might be. Phase two, concepting, familiar to all of us in product development, but with a twist here, creating new product ideas with consumer input, not just any consumer input, behavioral insights. Phase three, building and validating prototypes with consumer input, a process we call co-design. A very interesting process. It's got some really interesting techniques for getting at what's sort of subliminal in terms of consumer thought process. And then phase four, scaling up prototypes in a particular way, and we'll talk about that a little further on, for commercial production to manufacture scalable saleable products for it. The last phase, phase 5, which is an in-store test. This is often something not done very frequently in product development, but can be a very significant learning opportunity in putting before national rollout. So I am going to hand it off to Dave, and he is going to take us through a little bit more detailed discussion about this first phase, finding focus.
Yeah, just before I transition to the next slide, this sort of approach is really part of an agile sort of way of thinking about taking your products to market. And there was some research done in 2017 as part of the Pacemaker data set on fast-moving consumer goods, so very relevant to the food industry. And the work that IRI did showed that 60% increase in success rates and 30% reduction in market taking strategies like this. So I think it's very relevant. So kind of delving into this first area of finding your focus, becoming a disruptor starts with the deep dive, as Mark was talking about, not only knowing what are the category leaders, who's playing, in your category, but also what are the underlying motivators of those consumers. The same goes, if you're adjusting to changing consumer needs or pivoting because you're facing a new competitor, it's still the same need for understanding the category, understanding the category users. So we start with these behavioral consumer insights, as Mark has mentioned. Disruption is a consumer-driven process. So it's really important to understand that. And so consumers change their behaviors because they're seeking some change or to mitigate their lives, such as they're doing right now with coronavirus. Now, if you think about it, it's like we're looking at a kind of a three-step process that within this idea of finding your focus. And the first is just understand the category. Who are the category leaders? Who are the players in it? And who are those consumers? So this is a case study that we recently completed. It was some research for Tyson. And actually it was something that we presented about a month ago, co-presented with Tyson at one of our Webinars Now series. But what we did is we first looked at the category itself, so know who are the players, and then secondly, we then measured as much as we could think about in terms of potential motivators. We looked at the pieces and parts of all these products, from the brand itself to the claims they're making to the ingredients used in the products themselves and how it looked and felt. And we measured these things and got feedback from consumers. And then the third thing we did is we use a lot of implicit techniques in this, things that are understanding the behavioral psychology of how people react. And then we actually gave consumers choices. We gave them sets of products and said, pick the most likely to buy and the least likely to buy, and these are category buyers. And what we did is we put that information together, and we're able to do different things. One of the things, we're able to analyze the data to see who are the category leaders in terms of consumer choices. And these are the results we got from all the choice work. In addition to that, we're able to beginning to understand some of the important drivers by looking at the correlations between and the modeling between the category choices and these what we call behavioral KPIs, the motivators, the underlying things, these importance drivers. We find that healthy choice and appetizing appearance and good ingredients and things like budget friendly are really, really important in terms of this category. So the result of this was some opportunities for category learnings, to make recommendations for what might be the category opportunities. And you can see here by this quote, the director that we're working with, allowed them to quickly understand, where they need to put their focus if they're to successfully be able to compete in this category. So really, really relevant in there. So that information becomes then the basis where you can go into the next step, the next sort of phase of this sort of agile product development process that we call craze, but is relevant for most any sort of process that is. So if you want to be a disruptor, you need to think about these and taking these insights to build concepts. And we do this through some rapid iterative techniques that we call co-creation. Now, to co-create, what we mean by that is you're combining the imagination of consumers with the creative, technical expertise of people on the innovation team. That can include your ingredient suppliers, perhaps, or ingredient innovators, your culinologists and other product developers, as well as those that have sensory and behavioral science sort of expertise bringing to the table. And you combine this. And what we do first is we place consumers in a mindset of play through utilizing Legos, okay? And it's a technique that's a really cool technique that I'm going to talk about here in a case study in a minute. And then Mark is going to take you through a case study where we're going to use this imagination from play information to actually create concepts. And then in the third step, Mark will talk through how to pick the winners, the winning concepts that show the greatest promise to disrupt by measuring emotional impact. Okay, so that's the three sort of steps here that we're going to go through. So in the front one, number one, is this technique is called playful insights. This is an example of some work we did with IFF, International Flavors and Fragrances, in support of a brand called Olala out of Turkey. And what we did is we took various different activities. We had people put into this playful mindset using Legos, because everybody's played as a kid with Legos, and adults can do it too. And we use these Legos to foster imagination for what might be indulgent, healthy eating, okay? And with that, these Lego creations that we had people to create become metaphors for how to unlock their creativity and to unlock the what does healthy, indulgent snacking look like in terms of taste, look, feel, smell, sensory qualities, and things like that. And so what we get out of this is things like freshness is important, social aspects, social sharing, sensorial experiences that are unique, a personal touch or homemade and things, and pure unlocking that idea of pure intelligence. Really important information for culinologists to give them the direction. So with that, I'm going to hand it off, so Mark can really talk to you about further what culinologists may do in sort of creating platforms and concepts based on information like this.
Thanks, Dave. Well, this is a kind of a cornucopia of information we're not used to getting in a typical sort of closed product development process. And, the understanding that consumers are providing through some of this research work that Dave and his folks are doing gives us a general direction on what they aspire to, what they hope these products fulfill in their lives, things to avoid, and subtle cues that the product could have that could key some of these consumer needs and signal, hey, I'm for you, buy me. We try to incorporate that feedback into first selecting the product platforms. We're going to talk about what a platform is in a second, and then into the concepts themselves. So we define product platforms as things that have similar manufacturing needs, similar equipment, similar form factors, and would be done at one co-man or one plant. So that's kind of how we generally define a platform. And then within a platform, there would be concepts. So we were tasked with coming up with platforms for hard-boiled eggs. And, I like to use this example because, we can all imagine a hard-boiled egg and go like, well, how many different things can you do with a hard-boiled egg? And we know, the imagination is sort of endless of product developers, and you sit down and you ideate and you come up with all sorts of things. And these are just some examples of different platforms that we came up with for the American Egg Board when we were exploring how can we expand the sales of hard-boiled eggs, where are the opportunities. So within platforms, we then create concepts. And these particular concepts were created for, again, teeing off of the American Egg Board, Incredible Egg, for more culinary forward concepts that used high percentages of industrial egg ingredients. That's why these concepts were created. But they're very culinary forward leaning, and each one is illustrated here to show you that these are different platforms. Cookies, that's a platform. The Bundino Bites is a whole sort of a custardy platform, and then these mousse pop cakes would be a third platform. So we create concepts within platforms. We write up the concepts into concept statements. They're usually quite detailed with rationale about why we think each concept is going to meet some of the requirements that Dave and his group have uncovered in the category deep dive, and what's driving consumer insights in the co-creation process that he just went through. And then we're going to take those concepts and we are going to put them back in front of consumers again and see how they react to them in a concept test. And the concept test is going to really elicit comparison and feedback by the consumers to say, hey, are we scratching the itch that you described with these products?
Yeah, so just to build on this, the idea of behavioral impact is the metrics. We look at emotions, especially anticipation emotions like hope and so on, intrigue, as well as relevance to people's lives in the context of different moments. So you can get some great ideas to pick winners, pick things that have the potential for the greatest emotional impact.
And now these are concepts; these are not prototypes yet. So they're reading the page and they're imagining these things and would they be appealing or not. Now we get to the third phase or the third sprint. We are actually creating prototypes now. We're taking the information that we've gleaned from the concept selection process, and we're going to take those concepts and say, now how do we interpret? And we all know from our product development work that you can take something on the written page and interpret it in many different ways. But when we start to interpret these concepts, we have a lot more context for what consumers are actually looking for and what is motivating them. So we're going to create these prototypes, and then we are going to try to understand, are these prototypes going to deliver something that is unique? Is it really going to be a disruptor in the category? So we go through a process called co-design. Again, we're bringing that consumer in, and we're going to go through a series of rapid iterative design sprints that are going to be guided by this consumer feedback. We're going to put products in front of consumers. They're going to, Dave's group is going to take them through a series of exercises. We're really going to get insight into how they're responding to these prototypes, and then we're going to bring them back, bring the prototypes back, and we're going to redo them and put them back out in front of consumers again. And we may do this iterative process a number of times until consumers are giving us feedback that is really great about the prototypes, that really are hitting on all cylinders. So in the co-design process, it's typically a three-step process for creating these initial prototypes. That's really the creative skills of the team, of the development team. We are rapidly iterating with consumers, as I mentioned, and then in step 3, we're validating those prototypes. And Dave's going to talk a little bit about that process and how the validation takes place with an example from Campbell's.
Right. So we did some work, and actually, this is something we've co-presented with a person I'll show at the end here. And it's something that what they're looking at is creating a line of these sort of very fresh veggie soups. And their objective here was to create this line very fast. They had a 7 month from the launch of the initiative all the way to try to get in market. And so they wanted a line that are veggie soups that were familiar with a twist, was sort of the objectives here.
So to start, the culinary team created 27 prototypes around 3 potential platforms that were identified as opportunities in the category deep dive in the concepting phases of the project, the co-create phase. And those 3 platforms were thin soups, so sort of broth-driven soups, hearty, thick soups, and veggie-centric soups. And we were focused on the co-creation cues that came out of the co-creation system and sessions with the consumers. And those were generous portion sizes, perception of fresh, as Dave mentioned, comforting and warm and colorful. So Dave's going to take us through the co-design session.
So what we did is we took those 27 different sort of prototypes, and we kind of bucketed them in these and presented them to groups of consumers. This is a qualitative technique, and we bring people in, we prime them in a soup moment, and some exercises for that, and then we expose them first to the concept, and then we expose them to a series of different prototypes. And we asked them to associate what it is about the prototypes is or is not associated with key elements of the concept. And then after each session, we debrief with the whole team. They're behind the one-way mirror. Some people are remotely on video camcorders and so on, so they're watching everything going on. We're synthesizing. We got culinologists, also with package designers, marketers, product developers, sensory behavioral scientists, all there looking at these insights, talking about that, and then that feeds next steps, design changes that the culinologist can take back and then create the next iterations. And the graphic artists, we did this with packaging as well, are able to take to the next very rapidly. So we're doing multiple sessions, multiple iterations, even in the same day. So in the end, we're able then to come up with this group of, we had actually 5 really promising prototypes that evolved. We screened some out and evolved others forward. And from the 5, we presented those into a mini central location test. We primed people, we exposed them, and we got feedback so that we're able to pick finally 3 of this new line that were ideal.
Great. So, how do we take this consumer feedback on these prototypes, obviously a very critical part of the whole process, and incorporate them into the design of the products, into that next iteration? And we do it through these translation of these cues into technical attributes. And you can see here that, Dave's group put together a bit of a flow chart that explained what consumers wanted to see in the hearty category, and it gave us guidance in terms of the amount of ingredients and the visual cues, transparency. So we had these dimensions that we could move the slider scale along as we were developing the prototypes and getting feedback from consumers to really understand what was just about right for them in each of these categories. And this is information that generally doesn't flow in, even in traditional sensory evaluations, back to the development team. And with an integrated process like this, all of that information flows back, both because we're in the sessions watching behind the one-way mirror, but also we're talking with the behavioral scientists. Here's another example on color and thickness and understanding the, ratings of each of the prototypes on these scales and where they fell, and giving us very precise direction on how that next iteration needs to look to kind of hit the just about right, the jar scale.
Yeah, so at the end, what we're able, this is a woman that we were working with at Campbell's at the time, and she was just excited. The whole team was really excited. In 1 month from the engagement, actually we did this research in 3 to 4 days. We were able to translate that concept into a product footprint, enabling commercialization in 7 months. So it really was a sprint, a series of sprints that got them there, but the product launched and it did very well in the market as far as I was understanding.
That's great. And we're going to take these prototypes now. We've gotten sort of consumer feedback and gold standard, if you will, vetted with consumers. And now we're going to go through in phase 4 of Craves. This sprint is our modified commercialization. So in that process, we are going to first develop the final product specifications, at least final as far as getting to a pilot run is concerned. We're working with a co-man. Obviously, we're producing pilot samples and small runs, and we're not launching the product yet. We are just getting samples that are saleable so that we can put them into the 5th phase of the process, which is in-store test. So we're going to take these, they're commercialized products, but they're not perfect. They're just good enough to get us a read on consumer reaction to the product proposition, price, packaging, claims, on-package marketing, story, etc. And then we're going to be, going into the plant, supervising the pilot, making sure we got the production, to a consistent level, and all the labeling and everything else is legal. And then we're going to develop working specifications, the nutritionals and labeling, and a little bit of staff training so we can make sure things are made consistently, and give them some defect identification tips for the product and so forth. So, Dave's going to cover, now we've made the product in pilot, what happens to it?
Yeah. So in this final step, what we are recommending to become disruptor is to get to this commercialization step as quickly as possible. And in doing that as quickly as possible, it means getting product into the hands of consumers through retail stores. And so the process of watching it sell is not just sitting back and watching the revenue come in and from a point of sales, but rather we recommend taking your phase 4, the scale up, your pilot plant, your small production runs, and create products that you can place into stores for rapid iterative learning. Okay, so we have the ability to do this. It's really cool. So basically it's a 2-step process. First of all, we want to do this in-store testing it could be as few as 1 retail store, or it could be in a larger scale, many stores in multiple markets. Okay, this in-store testing though can involve A and B testing. You could have 2 variations of the packaging, or you can look at different pricing, or promotional tactics in retail to improve this product. You could even have an A and B type of product design if you wanted to. But further, this in-store testing can also, though, be integrated with what we call a buy home use test. And that is where consumers that actually buy the product, we can engage with them in the marketplace, in the retail establishment, and then ask them if they would try to opt into a survey where we would understand their pre and then post-use category trial choices. Okay, so we can understand the emotional impact of the experience, but also how it may change their behaviors before and after trying the product out at home. And so a case study of this is something very similar. Some work we recently have done on plant-based burgers. And what we were able to do through the home use part of this is to gauge emotional impact. You can see here, after the fact with this product Beyond Burger versus people's current product, they are happier, they are more excited, they're more pleasantly surprised, and they're actually full of pride. So it has really important emotional impact today. And further, we can look at, by looking at pre versus after, looking at the baseline, as we did way back when in Finding Your Focus, where we developed a behavioral baseline there. We can do the same thing here, and we can look at pre versus post to see what might be the lift, how the product, in this case Beyond Burger, impacts all the other products in the category from a choice basis. And you can see here, Beyond Burger basically is chosen 46% more after trial than before, which is incredible compared to average products, which is around 8%.
It really gives you some idea, prediction of what's going to happen when you launch into the marketplace for real in a national launch against the competition. Pretty powerful. So, in its totality, Craves is a solution, I think, that offers a way to come out with products that are not just designed to meet a need, but actually disrupt a category. It's done very quickly, typically in 6 to 9 months. As we showed you in the soup case study that was done in 7 months. And really, this ultimate speed, whether it's tending more to 6 or to 9 months, it depends on how complex the product is, what category it's in, and that drives how rapidly you can iterate in phase 3 in the co-design phase. Sometimes it's only hours between iterations, like as is the case with soup. Sometimes it could be a week between iterations if you have something like, something that's got to go through retort or some other more complicated process, and you might not have access to the equipment in the lab at pilot. Our clients are telling us the normal product development process they go through is typically 9 months to a year, and it does not involve the consumer insights or the store validation test that the Craves process does. So, I'm curious, as you're looking at this and thinking about your own product development process, how quickly does it go? How many elements does it incorporate that we've talked about in the process here? And I guess in summation, I hope that this session, Dave and I hope it's been valuable. Gives you some new thoughts and perspectives on how to tackle today's opportunities, how to be a disruptor, and how to satisfy emerging consumer needs in what is clearly an unsettled time for all of us. So if you wouldn't mind, we would really appreciate your taking a moment before we exit. We've got about 5 minutes left to just take a poll with us. Tell us how valuable the webinar content was, if you would recommend this, if the recording will be available, and if you're interested in the 30-minute complimentary consultation, let us know. We'll get back to you.
Yeah.
Okay, there it is. It's up, and please feel free to take the poll and let us know how it was for you.
And while you're doing that, after you voted, I see about a quarter of you have actually provided this input so far, and I really appreciate it. If everybody could please do this. It'll help us, understand what of this content is better. And we did not want to make this an infomercial at any means. What we want to do is just provide the information about this approach that we're seeing is having so much impact in this area because of disruptive, how disrupted things are, both from a consumer perspective as well as companies are seizing on the opportunity and becoming disruptors. So that said, we're going to follow this polling up here in a second with with some questions that you may have, and so I think we're at almost half of you have voted so far, and I'll so we're very appreciative of your feedback here. So, but this topic area is, we got about 60% of you have provided some input so far, and kind of waiting on a few more, if you could please. And I'm going to close it here in a second, because I think we're pretty much done here. All right, so I'm going to close the poll. Thank you very much for your inputs. So with that, I'm going to move here. We'll move on to taking some questions that you may have, and I'm sure many of you do have some questions. And we're a little bit long here, so longer than we normally have, but Mark and I had some important content we thought was, could be of help for people. So if people have time, I know it's getting close to almost an hour since we started this. We may not have time for questions. I think that's what I'm sensing here, because people are, but any questions here? We're ready to address them. And if not, we'll be glad to take them one-on-one with you, because I know a number of you, about a third of you actually, are interested in some kind of consultation, some follow-up discussion. So we're happy to do it there. So, okay, well, that said, I think we're kind of out of our time today. You have phone numbers and contact information from myself and Mark. Thank you so much for attending and listening to us on this such an important subject as disruptive innovation, and how you fuse together behavioral insights with product development expertise to help you become a disruptor. All right.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Yep. Take care. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.